So Plane is a movie about a plane that crash lands and then dangerous things happen to it. This sounds like such like a simple plane. It's like, okay, what's going to happen in this film? It's plane. It's about a plane. So, and the thing is, this film. Here's the thing. Like I could kind of dig on this premise. It's a plane that goes down in enemy territory, and they have the the commercial flight crew and the passengers have to fight their way out of a war torn situation. That could lead to some exciting stuff, and it just having the plane crash itself could be exciting as well. Unfortunately, Plane doesn't really do a lot of like it kind of just puts in the bare minimum to kind of get to those more exciting scenes, because to the film's credit, the best thing I can say is that the climax does have an exciting sequence where the plane is trying to take off and people are shooting at the plane, and somebody gets taken out with landing gear. That's an exciting scene. However, everything else that we have to build up to get to that exciting moment just kind of feels like it's like almost not even that it's going through the motions, just kind of that it's, just kind of like a retread. Like, for starters, you have Gerard Butler playing Brody Torrance, a commercial airline pilot, who they give him all like the essentials for this type of scenario. He's got a daughter that he's trying to get home to. He's got one last flight that he's got to make before he can spend time with her. He has a history of attacking passengers. He has problems relating with people. He struggles to maintain his plane. So we have all that great setup for him to become the action star here. As if it weren't obvious that you have Gerard Butler as the pilot here. Then you also have you have his co-pilot who's like, he's a little bit not quite like plucky, but he's like trying to get used to the way that Brody does his own work on the plane. And then you have a number of passengers who range from just like stock people who will be killed off during like one of the violent exchanges, as well as just like that one passenger who won't shut up. That one passenger who feels entitled that even when the chips are down and that their lives are at risk, he's still going to keep talking and talking and talking. So the plane, through like an error made by the airline, they are pushed through a storm that knocks out the plane and sends them crashing into an island on the Philippines that is currently, that is currently occupied by rebel forces that have guns, and they're taking hostages whenever they can and just, stocking up on resources. So it's a dangerous situation. They crash the plane. They're with in a little bit of a thrilling sequence. I would say it's thrilling if it weren't for the camera and the lighting. And here's the thing. I'm willing to admit that this might be a part of the way that the film was screened, but based on what I saw, the lighting was way too dark for this. Like, I get this, that they're cutting power to stress, like, the danger here, but having like the entire crash sequence where like the cabin is in darkness doesn't really work, because they want to showcase that there are two deaths during the plane crashing, when like people get launched out of their seats, and you're so in the dark that like, and because we haven't really gotten like the best introduction of these characters, you're trying to like peer on like okay, wait, who got hurt, who died here, are they dead? I can't quite see what it could have. I'm willing to admit that it could have been the lighting. Like, projectionists do tend to turn down the lighting for some screenings, but the camera work was a little bit like clunky here, where I couldn't quite get into it because it was so hard to watch it. Like, and even like the scenes where it takes place outside of the plane, where you thought, okay, exterior shots, you've got to have better lighting for this, because it's all visual effects, and it's still too dark where you can't tell what's going on. Like, my goodness, it's not off to a good start, and it doesn't get that much better, especially like, and the thing is, I was hoping this would be a buddy action comedy, because you have Brody Torrance teaming up with a criminal on board, who's being extradited, and so the criminal has to decide, like, I'm in a tough situation with y'all. I'm gonna use my skills, and I'm gonna fight back with Gerard Butler. And you think like, okay, you have a commercial pilot who's bitter about, working for the airlines, and a prisoner, who has a bit of a history. Now, that premise is a great idea to kind of build them up and have this buddy dynamic, but they have like next to no chemistry in this. It's like once they get to like realizing they need to survive, they're all business. All they do is talk about finding a way to get out, finding a way to survive. And true to that, like if this were real life, yeah, you probably wouldn't form that much of a bond with the prisoner, just like try to survive. But when you have, like when you have Gerard Butler and Mike Coulter, who plays Lewis on the plane, when you have those two characters together on the poster, and you see most of the action scenes with them together punching out rebels and shooting them up, and making like this daring escape on a plane, you want to see them connect. You want to have like some connection to them so that you're invested in seeing them take off. Aside from just like the bog standard of, Brody's got a daughter that he's got to get home to, which is like, that's a decent drive. But if you want to keep us invested throughout, especially since you don't see that much of the daughter, she plays like a minor role in, having phone contact. You want to see that connection between those two characters, and just like, the reason that I think like it, like with the crash sequence, it might be a problem with lighting too, is because there's a lot of moments that technically they just look terrible. In particular, there's one of the first scenes where Gerard Butler fights with one of the rebel forces. It's in a building where, they have this knockdown drag-out fight where they're punching each other, they're strangling each other, they're throwing them on desks, and I think like the choreography is staged okay, but they wanted to film this as kind of like that, like one continuous shot of just trying to get the camera as close as they could as possible for this fight while rarely cutting. And I don't think it quite works for the scene, especially when it feels off, because like it feels like they didn't get this fully through post-production, because the sound here just feels like what they picked up during the fight and not putting in like the extra like kind of like crunching and like the force and like the cracking of bones to make it more intense. It feels like the raw footage you would see of that fight before it's been like cleaned up, when you push it out in the final cut. So that was like I just stood there like baffled watching this, going like, what? This is like a decent fight, but why isn't it? Why is the camera so close? And why didn't they do like? Why didn't they have some cutting here? Why does the sound not feel like it's finished in this scene? What's going on? So you have all that build up, and it's like like I said, there's some. The fight could be good. There's another scene where Michael Coulter is running around smashing rebels with a sledgehammer, which is kind of cool. But they kind of cut away, and they don't let those violent moments linger as long as they should to make them more exciting. Not to mention like the ultimate climax of the film just has Lewis and Brody they just go their separate ways like quickly. There's not even like a knowing moment where they're just kind of like, one of us has got to stay behind, or like, this is where we part ways. It's just, Lewis finds it out. He's still a criminal. He's just going to make it on his own. And he just kind of leaves kind of unceremoniously in this film, which is a real letdown. You would think that those two characters would have more to do instead of just, business as usual as they kind of stroll through this passive action picture. Which sucks because, like I said, the climax is actually really intense. I like watching like kind of this plane make this daring takeoff when they've got like, barely any fuel and the electronics are barely working, and there's gunfire and explosions and rocket launchers and rebels and trucks and cars just like zooming towards them. That's a great setup, and there's, to its credit, there's some decent violence in that scene. But then immediately after that scene, we get like kind of like the bog standard, like, oh, I'm coming home, baby, like the very cliche action moment here. And if the film really just wanted to be action cliches, I could I could buy into that if it weren't for the fact that like technically there's a lot of elements that feel off here, and a lot of the actors are just kind of phoning it in where like, I'm barely invested in what they're doing, with the exception of I'm trying to remember like the name of the actor who's Tony Goldwyn, I think, is a special forces operator who comes in to kind of like manage another team who will come in and give some firepower to Gerard Butler. I actually liked his character, even though all he does is just sit in a room and bark orders at people. Like, it feels like of all the performances, his is the best because he's like the only one putting some effort into this role and actually giving some personality and character here. Whereas Butler, he's just doing the same character that he always does in action films. And Mike Colter is just not given much to do. Like, aside from action scenes, he's mostly kind of silent. His dialogue is nothing. There's rarely a moment where it's like, you can kind of connect with him or you kind of like dig his attitude. Like, even his stoic nature just doesn't quite exude like a certain level of like kind of like intimidation or cool that you would expect from that type of role. So it's like, I hate to use it, but you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to say it. Plane doesn't take off.